What if I told you that one of the most successful and loved torpedo bombers of World War II was a biplane, with a top speed of 143 miles per hour, was covered in fabric, and was more similar in design to some World War I aircraft rather than its contemporaries? If you are at all familiar with either the battleship Bismarck and its loss, or the Fleet Air Arm in general, you know what plane I'm referring to, the Fariey Swordfish. The Swordfish's development began in 1933 as a private venture to replace the older Fairey 3F for the Greeks who were wanting a new spotter for their navy. After the Air Ministry pushed out specifications for a similarly new spotter craft, Fairey would approach the Air Ministry and inform them of their work for the Greeks, eventually leading in 1934 to specification S-15/33, aiming to create a new spotter, reconnaissance, and torpedo bomber, leading to the designation of the Swordfish prototypes as TSR by Fairey. TSR Prototype 1 would not become the Swordfish, instead being what Fairey was working on originally for the Greeks before S-15/33 was pushed forth. It would be lost in a crash in September of 1933, with the pilot thankfully surviving. TSR Prototype 2, however, would evolve into the Swordfish, and would incorporate data from the previous loss of the first prototype, such as a lengthened fuselage to counteract the spin characteristics that caused its crash. Taking its maiden flight on April 17th of 1934, TSR Prototype 2 was found to be incredibly easy to fly, with very forgiving low-speed performance, and quickly led it to being tested with floats for use on battleships and battlecruisers as a spotter for main guns. Even with the extra weight and drag of the floats, it happily flew with few if any grievances. Beginning production in 1936, the Swordfish found quick adoption into the Fleet Air Arm, replacing the Blackburn Shark. Subsequent trials and practice with the Swordfish soon gave it the nickname of the String Bag, for the endless list of external weapon types it could carry, from torpedoes to general-purpose bombs to RP-3 rockets, depth charges, and even belly-mounted radars later in life. By the time war broke out, 26 Fleet Air Arm squadrons stood ready with the Swordfish and would enter its first trial by fire in the Norway campaign of early 1940. Here, it began to quickly cement itself in the record books. On April 11th of 1940, it saw its first combat sortie, attacking 2 enemy destroyers in Trondheim and scoring the first hit of the war by torpedo-carrying aircraft. 2 days later, a Swordfish launched from HMS Warspite scored the first Fleet Air Arm U-boat kill, sinking U-64 with a direct hit. After Italy joined the war on June 14th, Swordfishes took off from a station in France and snatched the title for the first bombing raid upon Italian soil before the evening was even upon them. On July 8th, following the controversial Operation Catapult, Mers el-Kabir would be struck by Swordfish in the follow-up Operation Lever, crippling the French battleship Dunkirk with torpedoes, while also acquiring another first by being the first battle the Royal Navy had won without the use of gunfire, as no fighters flew to intercept them. On November 11th of 1940 came the Battle of Taranto, where Swordfish ambushed the port and inflicted extensive damage to the Italian fleet moored in anchor. Notably, this strike was performed at night after extensive preparation and proved that aircraft could, with one decisive strike, change the balance of power in an entire theater of operations, something the Japanese would keenly observe from their attaché offices in Berlin, and then apply the next year. Speaking of the next year, in May of 1941, with the war having just begun, Germany, with the biggest ship of the Atlantic mounting the biggest guns, set sail for the Atlantic supply convoys, keeping Britain in the fight. After the Battle of the Denmark Strait and watching the mighty Hood go down, Swordfish from HMS Ark Royal and HMS Victoria struck Bismarck multiple times in the following days, first causing an oil leak which allowed the Royal Navy to more easily track it, then causing the rudder to jam and render the ship unmaneuverable, leading to its demise by HMS Rodney and HMS King George V. When Germany switched to using U-boats to attack Atlantic convoys, Swordfish would be employed, upgraded with both sea search radar and rockets to hunt down the U-boat menace. With their durability and low takeoff speed, some were even flown from merchant aircraft carriers, being little more than transports with an aircraft catapult, becoming a nasty surprise for several U-boat captains. In October of 1941, the Swordfish became the first aircraft to perform a night attack guided by radar, sinking a U-boat in the dead of night using their sea search radar to find and hit the submarine with bombs. In December of the same year, it scored the first kill of the RP-3 rocket by sinking U-752 off of Ireland, a rocket that would then go on to be the mainstay rocket of the British Armed Forces for several decades. In 1942, Germany conducted the Channel Dash, evacuating its naval forces including battleships Gneisenau and Scharnhorst from France to Norway. 6 Swordfish, led by Eugene Esmond, who led the Swordfish attack on Bismarck, scrambled to intercept the force as they sailed. Unfortunately, in shades similar to the Battle of Midway only a few months later, the Swordfish lacked sufficient fighter cover on their approach and were subsequently slaughtered by Luftwaffe fighter escorts. This loss would mark the Swordfish's withdrawal from torpedo bomber duties in favor of the more advanced Fairey Barracuda and Albacore. It would continue to serve in anti-submarine warfare duties, as well as becoming a favored trainer aircraft of the Fleet Air Arm till war's end, where it was then retired, having stopped production the previous year in 1944 with a total assembly number of nearly 2,400 aircraft. Today, 11 examples exist around the world, with the vast majority in the UK, 4 of which remain airworthy. Though an archaic design by the start of World War II, the Swordfish proved that you didn't have to be cutting edge or brand new to rack up an absurd amount of firsts for a naval aircraft. From the first airborne radar-guided night attack to the first submarine kill with the Fleet Air Arm to even one of the first massively successful port ambushes at night that would later inspire the Japanese ambush of Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. For a dusty old biplane, that is a legacy that even today shines bright.